Chapter 3. Smissy is real and the government knows it.
It has been almost 2 weeks since Reverend Cuomo and Damielle Stopframe had gone on their first date. They had been on call together, spending hours talking and getting to know each other, although they haven't been on another date yet. Today was now Sunday and Damielle was excited to go to church. Only to see the one and only holy hottie Reverend Cuomo, of course. And oh boy, he couldn't wait. On the phone, Damielle was able to hear Rivers' luscious and breathable voice, but he wasn't able to see his bootylicious face and that goddamn hell of a body. It was quite a disappointment, honestly. There was an underestimate of what Damielle would do for Reverend Cuomo. Normally he didn't even go to church, but now he was a devoted Christian, just for Reverend Cuomo. He would even get on his knees to pray, of course, amongst some other explicit activities that resulted in particular white substances. Damielle had just parked his car in the parking lot of the church. On the way, he had decided to make a detour at a clothing department to buy the Reverend a little gift. He had bought Reverend Cuomo a sweater. Damielle had noticed how passionately Rivers would talk about sweaters over the phone, especially his fascination in destroying sweaters. Damielle was starting to think that the seductive, sacred Reverend Cuomo had a kink for destroying sweaters and holding threads as he walks away. Damielle took the bag that contained the sweater inside and opened his door, making his way into the church. Damielle walked up the front of the church and took a seat on the pew closest to the front of the sermon. Reverend Cuomo wasn't there yet, and Danielle's heart ached to see him. He sat while bouncing his knee in anticipation for his true love to come and speak words of love through his ears and into his heart. About 10 minutes passed, and the church was filled with the residents of Morrilton. But Reverend Cuomo wasn't in the room yet. Suddenly the door opened and in came a stressed-looking Rivers Cuomo. Damielle wasn't quite sure why Rivers was so distressed. He would make sure to ask the holy hottie after the sermon. Rivers took a deep breath and apologized for being late and began his sermon.
Today's topic is homosexuality,
Rivers Cuomo said, glancing around the church to catch the expressions of Morrilton. There was a mix of looks that filled the church, and Damielle was very confused with the current situation.
More formally, I would love to discuss the wonderful events of homosexuality that are scheduled to go down today.
Rivers continued more confidently now. Damielle perked up in his seat. He wondered if the events Rivers was talking about had to do with him. He wondered if Rivers was going to declare his love for him inside the church full of Morrilton's residents. Damielle could only dream about it, although that's not what the Reverend quite had in mind.
I would like to announce I have been given authority to perform marriage to 2 very special men at 5 o'clock this afternoon, and anyone here is welcome to attend.
An eruption of voices broke out throughout the church, many confused, others with pure curiosity, and many other mixed emotions.
The wedding in which these 2 men will join together in holy matrimony, their souls intertwined in pure love and trust is...
The church went from dead silent. Everyone was curious to where this was going, and oh my God.
These 2 wonderful and handsome men are Stephen Morrissey of the Smiths and Robert Smith of the Cure.
The whole church was in shock of the revelation that Rivers had shared. Nobody saw that coming.
Yes, bitches, Smissy is real, and right after their wedding they are kicking off their new tour. The spicy, sultry, seductive, steamy Smissy tour, said the holy hottie in a confident and fruity voice.
Holy fingsht. Not in a million years anyone could have seen this coming. There was no Gerard way.
And that's all I have to say. Make sure to get on your hands and knees for our holy Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because when 'twas a knave thy father took thee into the city to see a symphony, also thou mustn't be well and thee must promise,
said Reverend Cuomo erotically, and he dropped the mic. The sermon was dismissed. Everyone was leaving, and Rivers rushed over to Damielle before Orel could bombard him with questions.
Hey Damielle.
The Reverend said that while biting his lower lip, and holy fingsht. Damielle just wanted the foxy man to do him right then and there in that spot.
Yeah, Rev?
You should come over to my place.
Danielle's breath hitched in his chest.
To get ready, of course.
Rivers said slyly and winked.
Yeah, I would love to.
Damielle said while blushing, his heart beating rapidly inside his chest. Rivers grinned and held his hand out for Damielle to take. Damielle shyly took his hand and they walked out of the church. They were happy together. It was now a couple hours later, and Reverend Cuomo opened the car door so Damielle could get out of the car. They had arrived at the wedding ceremony. Inside the church, Reverend Cuomo walked up to the altar where Robert Smith was standing, patiently waiting for his fiancée to walk down the aisle. Damielle sat down in one of the pews near the front, and he couldn't believe how close he was to Robert Smith. the Robert Smith, the sexy goth frontman of The Cure. But Robert Smith was nothing compared to Rivers Cuomo. Danielle peeled his eyes away from Robert Smith and landed them on Rivers. Danielle stared at him longingly, shocked that he was able to go out with such a charming man. Although it wasn't Friday, Danielle sure as hell was in love. Everyone's attention turned to the front of the church. Everyone went drop dead silent. The talk in the room was now just as dead as Jack Twist. The flower girl had started walking down the aisle. The flower girl was Freak Bob. He was prancing down the aisle very freakily and fruitily. Except he wasn't exactly a flower girl. Hell, he wasn't even a girl. And he wasn't scattering flowers either. Freak Bob was scattering condoms instead. He definitely lived up to his name, that was for sure. Freak Bob continued to walk down the aisle and he gave a small wave to his boyfriend, the one and only P. Diddy with fur, Alvin the Chipmunk. Freak Bob, the condom boy, finished scattering the condoms, and Morrissey started to walk down the aisle to his beloved, soon-to-be husband. Morrissey walked up to the aisle and stood in front of Robert Smith at the altar. They looked into each other, his eyes lovingly, and Danielle could really tell they cared about each other and were happy to get married.
Welcome, everyone. Today we are gathered to join these two lads, Robert Smith and Stephen Morrissey, in holy matrimony,
said Rivers, teary-eyed.
Robert, do you take Morrissey to be your husband?
I do.
Robert replied in a British accent.
Morrissey, do you take Robert to be your beloved husband?
I do.
Morrissey answered in an accent just as equally British as Robert's.
Okay, now it's time for your vows to one another.
Whenever I am alone with you, you make me feel like I am free again. Whenever I am alone with you, you make me feel like I'm clean again. However far away, I will always love you. However long I stay, I will always love you. Whatever words I say, I will always love you. I will always love you,
said Robert Smith. His cheeks flushed pink and he was teary-eyed, but in a happy way.
If a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. And if a 10-ton truck kills the both of us, to die by your side, well, the pleasure, the privilege is mine,
said Morrissey passionately, a whole lot of love in his voice.
Now the ring exchange.
Reverend Cuomo gestured over to Frank the Bunny, who was the best man as well as the ring bearer. Frank the Bunny handed over the rings to each of the homosexual fruity British men.
You may exchange the rings.
Robert Smith and Morrissey quickly exchanged their wedding rings, excited to get married and to spend the rest of their lives together.
I now pronounce you husband and husband. You may now kiss the Brit,
Reverend Cuomo said, happy to marry the two homosexual men. Morrissey took a step forward and cupped Robert's gothic cheek with his hand and leaned in for a little smooch. Robert tilted his head, giving Morrissey access for a kiss. Morrissey leaned in a bit more and pressed his pink lips against Robert's. The kiss was gentle and delicate, and it showed their journey from enemies to lovers. Smissy was officially real and the government knows it. Everyone in the church cheered for the two newlywed men. It was time for dancing now. Enough with this other confusing Fs. The doors of the church quickly opened and 3 men walked into the church with instrumental gear. They nodded to Rivers and one of the men handed Rivers a guitar and a mic.
Hey everybody, this is my band Weezer and we are here to kick off some songs to celebrate the sexy Smissy marriage and give him a hell of a send-off for the spicy, sultry, seductive, steamy Smissy tour. So everybody put your hands together,
Rivers said, his voice booming across the church. Everybody started clapping, and Danielle could hear the sound of the band starting to play.
Alright, this song is a demo, is called We're All Bisexual, and I dedicate this song to my wonderful, hot, homosexual date, Damielle Stopframe.
Rivers started singing, and Danielle couldn't believe his ears. The way the word bisexual rolled off his tongue and off of his lips was absolutely astonishing. The bisexuality was so strong, in fact, he could feel the bisexuality radiate off Reverend Cuomo and to all of the wedding guests. It was like Rivers had cast a spell on everybody, especially Danielle. Danielle was absolutely lost in Rivers' luscious voice, and his mind was starting to swirl. He wanted them to run away together. They would spend some time forever. They would never feel bad anymore. All on an island in the sun.
We're all bisexual. We have all loved women and men.
Reverend Cuomo sang, hitting all the right notes. Besides from hitting all the right notes, Danielle knew that Rivers could also hit all of the right places. After Rivers and the band finished the song and played a couple more, a limo pulled up to the church to take Robert Smith and Morrissey on their honeymoon. Robert Smith and Morrissey walked hand in hand into the limo and shut the doors. They weren't visible from the inside because of the tinted windows, but Danielle could guess what they were doing. The limo drove off after a couple of minutes and it was time to leave the wedding. Rivers extended his hand out to Danielle. Danielle took it, and they walked towards the car together. Once in the car, Rivers started his car and starting his way towards Danielle's home. The car was quiet, only filled with the sounds of Radiohead on the radio. After parking in the driveway and opening the car door for Danielle, Rivers walked Danielle up to the front porch.
So I guess this is it for tonight?
Rivers asked, giving Danielle a small, simple smile, yet so lovingly at the same time.
I actually have something for you. I didn't have a chance to give it to you earlier because of the wedding, but I want you to have it now.
Danielle replied, nervous yet excited.
Sounds great.
Rivers said in a suggestive tone.
We better get inside then.
The two homosexuals waked inside the house and took a seat on the couch. Danielle turned the news and the television for background noise and handed Reverend Cuomo the bag with the sweater in it. Reverend Cuomo stuck his hands into the bag and pulled out the sweater. It was a simple sweater. The shade of the sweater was 189 BCC. Danielle knew how much Rivers loved that color. Rivers had spent hours on the phone, just rambling about how sexy and perfect that particular shade was.
Holy FV seeking hell, Danielle. You are amazing. I am such a slut for sweaters, and that shade is just moi,
said Rivers, his eyes filled with love and joy. The sweater slut was about to say something very kinky about the sweater, but his attention was directed to the news announcement on the television.
There have been some reports from our news anchors reporting very tragic and unfortunate news regarding the spicy, sultry, seductive, steamy, smissy tour of The Cure and the Smiths. The spicy, sultry, seductive, steamy, smissy tour is now cancelled due to a recent accident regarding the smissy honeymoon. There have been reports of an accident in which a double-decker bus has crashed into the limo of the two homosexuals. Conditions of the two men are still unknown, but we are sending out thoughts and prayers to Jesus,
said the woman on the news with a sorrowful expression plastered on her face. Rivers and Danielle were shocked at the recent turn of events. What a poor choice in wedding vows that Morrissey had said.
That's certainly very tragic. I need some time to process this. I think I should go back home now.
Rivers said to Danielle, still in shock.
Wait, Rivers?
Yeah, Danielle.
Rivers said, confused. Danielle couldn't turn back now. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't afraid. He knew that Rivers liked him, and he didn't want to miss his shot.
Rivers, holy Cuomo, will you make me the gayest FG in Morrilton by having the honor of being my boyfriend?
There was a moment of silence before Danielle could see the corners of Rivers' mouth turn up into a grin.
Hell yeah, to the motherfucking yes,
Rivers said passionately, wrapping his arms around Danielle and giving him a kiss on the lips. Danielle really was falling for Reverend Cuomo, and he was falling fucking hard.